Everybody, welcome back to another episode of Shifty's 49ers Talk. In today's video, we are going to be delving into and looking at my initial 53-man roster projection for the San Francisco 49ers. There are a couple of surprises in this video, so stay tuned for that. And guys, I really do hope you enjoy the video. Let's jump right in. Alrighty guys, let's kick off the 53-man roster projection with the quarterback spot. And the three guys that we're going to have here on the roster are going to be pretty obvious. And that's going to be Brock Purdy, Trey Lance, and Sam Darnold. The only way I see this working out any differently is if there's a trade. And the guy who I could potentially see a trade would be Trey Lance. And how does that situation come about? Well, I think that if Brock Purdy is named the starter, Trey Lance might be thinking, well, I'm never going to get an opportunity here in San Francisco, and maybe he'll then go on to demand a trade. And if that were the case, I wouldn't necessarily blame him. He's in a good situation in San Francisco with regards to the coaching is real. Kyle Shanahan, it's on a really good team. But I think at this point, Trey Lance probably just wants to play. I don't blame him. He was a number 3 overall pick, and he's been hurt. So he wants to get out there and get some reps and maybe go to another team where he gets that opportunity. Ideally, I'd like to see through the rest of training camp and through preseason that we do have a legitimate quarterback competition. All signs right now, to me at least, are pointing towards Brock Purdy being named the starter. But I'd love to see Trey Lance, maybe even if he's on the roster come regular season, and I hope he is, that maybe we can sprinkle in some plays with Trey Lance just to keep defenses honest and guessing. But I really do hope that there is some way, somehow, Trey Lance gets a legitimate shot at being the full-time, long-term franchise quarterback that we've been missing for so long. And that's not a knock on Brock Purdy. I hope whoever's behind center does really well for the 49ers. Now, moving on from the quarterback position, we're going to be looking at the running back room. And I think this running back room is the best in the NFL. In this, we're going to include fullback as well. So if we look here, we're going to have Christian McCaffrey leading the way. We're going to have Elijah Mitchell, then Jordan Mason, and then TDP as running backs. And then we'll have Kyle Juszczyk. Now you have the best fullback in the game, arguably the best running back in Christian McCaffrey in the game, and you have really quality depth pieces behind them. Elijah Mitchell, when he's healthy, really good player. You look at Jordan Mason, exploded onto the scene as an undrafted free agent last year. He looked really good. I think he'll get better. And then TDP has had a great training camp so far. So a deep, talented running back room. I just love it. Kyle Shanahan loves to run the football. You gotta have a lot of depth and quality depth at that. And I think that's exactly what the 49ers have. Now, if we move on to the tight end group, this is where things might get a little bit interesting here. I'm actually going to have us keeping 4 tight ends. We'll kick it off with George Kittle. We all know that. No surprises there. But behind him, we're going to have rookie third-round pick Cameron Latu. Someone who I think was maybe a little bit overdrafted in some people's opinions. I do think that he will work out pretty well for the 49ers. Tight ends, it typically takes them a little while to get going in the NFL because they just have so much responsibilities, blocking assignments, receiving. There's just so much that goes into being a tight end that it's difficult to come in immediately and produce. But I do think he will get some opportunities in his rookie year. Now, as our tight end 3, it's going to be Charlie Woerner. He is the solid blocker, definitely not a receiver. We saw that when we, last year, not a good receiver, but in terms of a blocking tight end, and you have to have those in those short yardage situations, I think Charlie Woerner is an ideal tight end number 3. And I think tight end, we're actually going to keep 4 tight ends, and the 4th will also be rookie Braden Willis. He's someone who I think has a lot of versatility in his game. That's something that Kyle Shanahan's going to absolutely love. I want to say that Braden Willis will be a guy who won't suit up necessarily on game days, but I do think he'll be valuable enough that we'll have to put him on the 53-man roster. Now let's move on to the wide receiver group, and this one here, absolutely no surprises, so we'll go through it relatively quickly. Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, what a great 1-2 punch. They complement each other really well, and they're both really, really fun to watch. So love that. Then Jauan Jennings, third down machine, really good in the red zone. I hope he kind of gets back to being a little bit more dependable in the red zone. Maybe we target him a little bit more. 2021, he was great. Last season, didn't target him as much. I'd like to see us go back to his direction down in the red zone when it's goal to go. Then we have Ray McLeod, who's also our kick returner, punt returner, speed guy, and Danny Gray. Danny Gray, good size, good speed. I'd like to see him get a little bit better in blocking through training camp to really give him more opportunities on the field. We know that if you're going to play in a Kyle Shanahan offense as a wide receiver, you better be a good blocker. And those are my 5 wide receivers. There's going to be some stiff competition, and it was really tough to leave out rookie Ronnie Bell. I think we'll try and sneak him onto the 53-man roster. However, it's still early days in the process, so I wouldn't be totally stunned if he does end up making the 53-man roster. We've had quite a bit of success drafting wide receivers in the 7th round in this regime. Think back to Richie James Jr. He was a solid producer for us. Jauan Jennings, also a 7th rounder, so we've had some good luck there. Could it happen again with Ronnie Bell? That remains to be seen. In this projection, though, he will be on the practice squad. Let's now move on to the offensive line. And we're going to kick it off with the starting offensive line. 5 guys here. In total, we'll be keeping 8. But the starting offensive line, Trent Williams, Aaron Banks, Jake Brendel, Spencer Burford, Colton McKivitz. And then for depth, we're going to have John Feliciano, someone who can play center and guard. We'll have Matt Pryor, who can play right guard, right tackle, can play left tackle, but really didn't look good there last year with the Colts. But in an emergency, he could play there. And then finally, Jalen Moore. He's your backup left tackle, left guard. So I think it really covers a lot of positions. Hopefully, we don't have to rely on any of those 3 backups, but in case we do, we have pretty much every single position covered if we suffer one or even multiple injuries. Now, it was tough to leave out a couple of guys here. Jason Poe was someone who I really do like his game. Really excited to see him in preseason. I think he has a lot of potential. I think, like last year, we'll try and stash him on the practice squad and just hope we can keep him there. And then also Nick Zakelj. Nick Zakelj was on the 53-man roster pretty much all of last year. He's a versatile guy, which of course is a huge advantage for him. But in this situation here, I'm going to have Nick Zakelj on the practice squad. Hopefully we can keep him there. But the competition, especially towards the back end of the offensive line, is going to be absolutely fierce. And you're going to see guys just playing their tails off in preseason, which is going to make those games a whole lot of fun to watch. Coming up next, we're going to be talking about the defensive side of the ball and who makes the 53-man roster there. So we had 25 guys on the offensive side of the ball, and we're going to match that on the defensive side of the ball with 25 players there. Let's kick it off with the defensive tackle position. And we have Javon Hargrave, the big free agent signing coming over from the Philadelphia Eagles. And this was such a massive move for the 49ers, one that I wasn't necessarily expecting to really make a big splash move in free agency. But boy, what a move this was to really give Bosa and Armstead another force in the middle. Basically, he is finally the replacement for DeForest Buckner that we've been looking for the last couple of years, and really someone that we hoped maybe Javon Kinlaw could develop into a type of player. They have a different game, but someone who can just be a force in the middle. And Hargrave can get after the quarterback, stout against the run, love his game. He leads the way here. And then he's going to be beside him, Arik Armstead, someone who I'm a huge fan of. Armstead seems to always show up in the big games, and I think he's really missed having a guy like Buckner beside him, so I think Armstead really being able to kind of get back to his game, be a force in the middle beside Hargrave. This defensive line is looking nasty already. Then we'll have Javon Kinlaw, someone who I'm really hoping can just finally see his potential, realize his potential, stay healthy. That would be awesome. And then behind them, depth pieces, we're talking Kevin Givens, Kalia Davis. Kalia Davis on the injured reserve last year, going through an injury, someone who's a big body guy, can really, eat up blocks in the run game. Kevin Givens, we've seen him, good pass rusher from the inside. I really like this defensive tackle group, and it's much improved over last year, in my opinion, with the addition of Javon Hargrave. Now, if we move to the edge spot, and it's going to be headlined, of course, by Nick Bosa, reigning defensive player of the year, and what a beast he is. Behind that, we have some really interesting pieces. Drake Jackson heading into his second year. He's added some muscle, looks bigger. Can he keep his athleticism? Maybe develop a few more moves. I think that he will improve, especially in another year of coaching with Chris Kasarik. Behind him, a couple of veteran guys. We're going to have Clelin Ferrell coming over from the Las Vegas Raiders, Austin Bryant coming over from the Detroit Lions. Now, Ferrell, former top 10 pick, has potential. Could he be another Arden Key type guy, someone who maybe didn't get the best coaching with the Raiders, maybe wasn't necessarily in the best situation, but coming to San Francisco, maybe it fits his game a little bit more. Austin Bryant, I love his athleticism, really great burst off the line, struggled with injuries. If he stays healthy, he could have a good year. And then we have rookie Robert Beal Jr., 5th round pick out of Georgia, someone who was kind of forgotten in that really, really good Georgia Bulldogs defense. And I think give him a year or two, coach him up, really get into that NFL shape, NFL rhythm, routine, going up against NFL offensive tackles. I think he could be someone who could be a steal later in the draft. The 5th round is typically the money round for the 49ers. Now let's move on to the linebacker group, and we're going to have 5 linebackers on the 53-man roster, headlined by the great duo Fred Warner, All-Pro Fred, and then Pro Bowl Dre Greenlaw. Both of these guys absolutely awesome. Third on the list here is going to be Oren Burks, special teams ace. I thought he looked good at linebacker in limited snaps last year. Someone who I think can maybe fill that Azeez Al-Shaair role as the number 3 linebacker, could fill in should there be an injury, and also really good on special teams. Then it's going to be the 2 rookies behind Oren Burks. We're going to have D. Winters and Jalen Graham. Now this is pretty tough because I think the Niners coveted both of these guys. The Niners took D. Winters in the 6th round and also talked about maybe taking Jalen Graham there, and I think both guys a lot of potential. It was pretty tough though. We did have a couple of options behind them: Marcelino McCrary-Ball, Demetrius Flanagan-Foles, guys who've been around the team for a year, maybe a couple years. Do they have the edge? Possibly, but maybe the Niners will bank on the upside of Winters and Graham, the rookies. Now let's move on to the cornerback room, and there is a possible player missing that you'd expect to be here, but let's go through it. Mooney Ward, of course, I think underrated around the NFL. He is our CB1. Opposite him is going to be Diamador Lenore, someone who came on really, really strong at the end of the season, played his best football in the playoffs, and that actually reminds me of somebody else who's a little bit farther down on this list. But after Diamador Lenore, we're going to have Isaiah Oliver, primarily working out of the slot, big body to go up against those big slot receivers. Really like his game. We have Sammy Womack here on this 53-man roster. Rookie last year, 5th round pick, someone who I expected a little bit more of considering how well he played in preseason, but then opportunities kind of limited themselves. But I think he has a really big second year, and we see a lot more of Womack. Can he make those big plays? And then finally, Ambry Thomas. And he is the guy who, a little bit like Diamador Lenore, Ambry Thomas, a couple of years ago, his rookie year, came in towards the end of the year, struggled in the regular season, but really stepped up his game in the playoffs. And I think the guy who I was talking about who's missing from this list is going to be rookie Darrell Luter Jr. He's someone who he has a bone bruise. He's going to miss the majority of training camp. Maybe they try and just sneak him onto the practice squad. You know, he hasn't really practiced much. He's not going to practice much in training camp, so other teams really won't see him. He probably won't play a ton in preseason, so it's possible you can sneak him onto the practice squad, or else maybe he has to go on to like an injured reserve type role if he doesn't heal from his bone bruise. But someone who I think, look, the Niners clearly think highly of. We took him in the 5th round, but right now I think you probably go with Ambry Thomas. The way that I could see Darrell Luter making this roster is, could there be a trade of Ambry Thomas? Maybe there's some injuries around the NFL. Maybe another team, maybe a team who has connections to the 49ers. Maybe the Jets have a couple of injuries, or the Houston Texans or Tennessee Titans, and they come calling, looking for a guy like Ambry Thomas, who would be for relatively low compensation and on a cheap deal, who could come in and play snaps for those teams. But at this moment in time, I'm going to go with the guy who's a little bit more of a veteran in Ambry Thomas, and we talked about Darrell Luter. So let's move on to the safety group, and this is a really, really good group. Topping off all-pro Talanoa Hufanga. What an ascension last year. He's clearly safety number one, and the other starter opposite him, Tashawn Gibson, they just had such a great connection, great chemistry. They really complemented each other so well last year, and I think they continued to do that this year. Jair Brown, our number one draft pick this year in the 3rd round, someone who maybe as the season goes on starts to take snaps away from Tashawn Gibson. However, what I've been hearing out of training camp is you've seen Jair Brown, he's played a little bit in the slot and moves around quite a bit. Could he be another Jimmy Ward type guy? That would be really interesting, and I think long term is going to be the successor to Tashawn Gibson and will play opposite Hufanga. Behind Jair Brown, we're going to have George Odom, special teams ace and all-pro for special teams last year. So shout out to George Odom, and a solid player to have at safety too. And he played some meaningful snaps in 2021 with the Indianapolis Colts at safety and played a little bit with the 49ers last year at safety. So really good option there. And then finally, Miles Hartsfield. Now this is someone I think when it came to free agency and we signed him, one of those signings that you kind of think, oh, he'll be gone. But he's someone who's very familiar with Steve Wilks, our new defensive coordinator, also has position versatility, which makes him a little bit more valuable than possibly some other guys. We do have some really intriguing players in the secondary. Quantrez Knight is someone who I really like his game, but I think when you look at it, 49ers in a win now mode, you want to go with that guy who's a little bit more of a veteran, who's played snaps in regular season games, and also has that position versatility. But that's going to round it out, guys, for the defense. 25 players right there. Coming up next is going to be special teams. And now we have everybody's favorite part of the game, and that's special teams, headlined by rookie 3rd round pick Jake Moody. Man, there was a lot of controversy when this pick happened, but I was actually pretty stoked about it. So I know a lot of people thought it was way too early to draft a kicker. And look, if Jake Moody can be a Justin Tucker, I think we'd all agree, slam dunk, great home run pick. If he's not, people will criticize the pick. You just typically don't see kickers drafted that high, but I think Jake Moody, he has a really impressive college resume, someone who's looked really good in camp so far, so really can't complain about it, and we're getting a starter from day one in the 3rd round, even if he is a kicker, but love Jake Moody. Punter, Mitch Wishnowsky, no surprises there. And of course, long snapper, Taybor Pepper. Good to hear that Mitch Wishnowsky is healthy. He passed his physical, so he is back practicing at training camp. And I think this is a solid group. Taybor Pepper, really solid long snapper. Wishnowsky never really lived up to his 4th round draft pick all those years ago, but he's a solid punter, someone that you can rely on for the most part. Pretty good tackler too. Jake Moody, I think, is going to be a good kicker. So this is a really, really solid group. So there you have it, guys. That is my 53-man roster. It's my initial projection. Things are going to change. There's such a long way to go in this process. It's not going to, there's going to be players, unfortunately, who will get hurt. There's going to be players who step up in preseason games, players who step up in training camp. So just keep that in mind. But I do want to hear your guys' thoughts on my 53-man roster, of course. And one of my favorite things to do and to read about is to see your guys' opinions. So feel free to drop your rosters or your position groups in the comments below. I absolutely want to read it, whether we agree or disagree. Sometimes disagreeing, you get the best discussions there. But I do want to really thank you guys for checking out this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and there's going to be a lot more content coming your way as we go through training camp, preseason, and of course the regular season, which can't come here soon enough. Can't wait. It's going to be awesome. Thank you so much. And guys, if you do enjoy the content, like, share, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I'm going to head out now, but before I go, I'm going to say 2 things, and that is the butt counts, and I'll catch you guys on the flip side.